Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Crossover U podcast brought to you right here on the Crossover channel. My name is Kanaye, joined again with Josh, and today we're bringing you some of our conference tournament picks for at least the mid-major conferences. Conference play in the regular season has pretty much capped off, and they've already started. I know Josh mentioned to me that the A10 has already started their conference tournament play. So some of those games have been going on right now, but Power 5 conference tournaments primarily start next week. So we're just going to give you guys a little bit of a preview into just some of the picks we have about who we think is going to walk away as the champions of their league. So, Josh, I'll ask you what conference you want to start with first. Might as well start at the top. I'm thinking the SEC or.
Let's you know what we'll do the SEC. I think a top to bottom with Power 5, and then we'll touch upon the mid majors that are still high in the level. So ACC, A10, I think like those teams
Right.
or those conferences. SEC, I want to say Auburn. I know everyone's going to say Auburn, but don't actually give me Auburn. Give me Florida. I really think
I don't hate that pick at all.
I'll be quick with you. The conference tournaments are so much different than regular season games that we don't put the same value on them. I mean, the SEC is always hectic. It's expected for these things to happen. One seeds don't typically win Power 5 conferences in the tournament. That's typically done in the regular season, and Auburn will have that already if they already don't. So from my standpoint, I feel like Auburn could probably lose, maybe even early on, because they'll probably keep their one seed regardless of what happens. Like, they can lose in the first round, and they would stay the overall seed. But it's teams that are chasing that one seed, like a Florida or even a Tennessee, or maybe an Alabama, that I could see winning it, and perhaps getting that one seed in return.
Yeah, I think I'm also kind of going to follow your trend of not going with Auburn. Give me Alabama. I know Bama dropped the game to Auburn in Tuscaloosa. I know they kind of had a little bit of a rocky set of games recently, but people also forget just arguably the toughest schedule of all time to end the season that Alabama has this year. I think a lot of people are starting to kind of underrate Alabama just because of some of the tougher losses. I know they just lost to Tennessee on the buzzer beater the other day in Knoxville. But, I mean, I think Alabama's coming with a vengeance this year. They made the Final Four last year, and they played as well as they could have in the Final Four, and it still wasn't enough. But I think this year I talked about it so much on this podcast about how Nate Oates brought pretty much everyone back. They addressed their rim protection need with Cliff Amore. I understand their defense still isn't great, and it's really their offense that's going to get them back to the Final Four if they are able to make it that far. But again, I just think Alabama's, like you mentioned, is going to be playing to try to earn a one seed. If Tennessee loses fairly early on in the SEC tournament, there is the opportunity for Alabama to go and get a one seed. Same with Florida. Florida, who I know is your pick in the SEC tournament, if they don't do well as well, then that's going to also help Alabama's case to get a one seed. And I know Alabama desperately wants to get a one seed this year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with Florida. I think that there's Florida, Tennessee, Alabama are three teams that could totally win a one seed. I think Tennessee has it right now. I don't see Florida and Bama having it unless they win the SEC.
Right. I just think like with I just want to just
you can keep going.
When the shooters and on Bama are on, that they're on, and that's arguably the best like team in the country when they're hitting their shots and when they get hot, just when they get on those insane shooting streaks like we saw last March. I don't want to have to play the Crimson Tide if they're hot. But yeah, I mean we can move on.
Definitely. I mean, it's the best conference, so you might as well see what's on. I mean, the best tournament in my opinion. But my personal favorite's the Big East, and I want to take a little knock at them. I'm going to be honest. Maybe there's a bias in me, but give me St. John's.
St. John's, yeah.
It's a really, really rough choice to not go for another team. Like, I would like to see a bid stealer like in like a Xavier or a Villanova even, or perhaps a UConn coming back from the dead. I mean, the Big East is really open, but I feel like St. John's kind of has it covered. They've already won the Big East like regular season, but typically doesn't lose in the tournaments in general. I think his style is keep winning until you don't, and it's hard to
Yeah,
really see him
exactly.
leveling off, especially with the guys that he has. And I know they have that driving power to keep going. So I would probably give it to St. John's.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely side with you there in St. John's. The other day after St. John's beat Seton Hall, they had their whole Big East regular season trophy ceremony on the court, and Rick Pitino got the microphone and said, "Listen, you know, keep your, stay awake because we're just getting started," or something along those lines. And I mean, if you're a Red Storm fan, I don't see how that doesn't fire you up with Pitino and the all white suit and everything. But I mean, yeah, I don't really know if St. John shows up and plays. I don't know if there's a single team in the Big East that can really threaten them to take away that Big East tournament championship from them. I do really like how you mentioned Xavier and Villanova. Those are two teams who I think Xavier gets in. I know off recording, me and you were both talking about Xavier, which we're also going to bring up a little bit later in the podcast, a little bit more about them. But Xavier's probably going to get in. Villanova's going to be playing for their tournament chances. I mean, their tournament lives pretty much. They need to win the Big East tournament to get into the big dance. And you just think about a guy like Eric Dixon, who, is the subject of a lot of criticism and his style of play. Me as well. I don't know. He tends to be called a free throw merchant. I don't necessarily disagree with that. But he is the leading scorer in the country. He is the last remaining person from that Final Four team with Colin Gillespie. And I just don't think he wants to go out on a sour note in his last year of collegiate basketball. So I think Villanova is definitely a team you got to watch out for. UConn, I think, depends on draw. I know off recording I was talking about to Josh about how UConn's able to avoid St. John's until the tournament championship, then there's the opportunity for them there possibly. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like Marquette, maybe. I think if Cam Jones can goes nuclear, that's definitely a way that Dave Marquette can win it. Same with kind of Creighton and Ryan Kalkbrenner, Stephen Ashworth. But Kalkbrenner tends to not really show up in the most important games he's played in. Ashworth is good, has played a lot better this year than last year, but again, tends to kind of shrink at times when his team most needs him. But again, St. John's, they have by far the best body work out of anyone in the Big East this year. They've beaten everyone. I mean, and it really just with their defense, it looks like no one can get anything going when they're playing the Red Storm, especially in MSG with considering the crowds they get now on the St. John's side. I mean, the Garden's going to be rocking with red during the Big East tournament.
Home game for every tournament game it'll feel.
Right.
But I
definitely. I mean, geez, you got Spike Lee coming to the games now too.
I know. It's a whole change of culture.
Right.
Every St. John's fan, honestly every Big East fan, like both of us, should be very happy for this opportunity. But
definitely,
I'm fine with seeing Villanova win it. It'd be really nice to see them back in the dance finally. They've been long away.
I do kind of want to go with the Xavier pick, but I think I don't see anyone beating St. John's. I don't think.
I feel you. Let's go on to the Big Ten. This one's wild.
This one's tricky.
I don't know. I mean, Wisconsin won it last year on very interesting circumstances. They beat Purdue. They made it through Illinois. I think they definitely could be a repeat offender for the Big Ten. I don't know if it's going to happen. I feel like Michigan State is just the best team overall, but I don't know if that's going to imply the opportunities. And then you have to look at the bid stealer.
Right.
Ohio State feels like a bid stealer right now. Nebraska is fighting for their lives in the bubble. I think there's like some lower teams that could like higher seeds, like in Oregon, for example. I don't really know. I mean, this one's going to be like one of my least expected guesses, but give me Ohio State. I think this is really a fight.
Okay.
I know, because it's hard to say. It really is hard to say, because I don't see any of those top 5 teams between like Purdue, Maryland, Michigan State, Michigan. I don't see them winning it. I think the Big Ten is almost structured in a way to give these lower level teams the opportunity to rise. I think that was like Wisconsin last year. I think Ohio State really stands in a good spot. Once again, depends what they get in the bracket, but Ohio State is just really randomly good wins. They have the win in Mackey. They have Just wins over Kentucky, UCLA, if I'm not wrong. They play at such a good level when they want to play, at least. I think, yeah, Bruce Thornton kind of needs to get things together if this works out, but Ohio State needs to win like maybe at minimum a game to make the March Madness tournament. And from there, I think you might as well pile it in, try and get an 8 or 9 seed, and get that conference bid from the auto.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to look at it as a success. I mean, if Ohio State can win 2, maybe even 3 games in the Big East, not my mistake, Big Ten tournament. I mean, you got to give that program so much credit, just with the turmoil that they had earlier in the season, and to get to a point where it looks like they are going dancing as it stands right now. And I mean, they had, like you mentioned, a game or two, gave 2 wins in the Big Ten tournament. Then they end up with a higher seed. I think you have to give Ohio State a lot of credit for their turnaround of this year from start to finish. But I look at the top of the Big Ten. Of course, obvious pick will be Michigan State. I'm kind of on the same wavelength with you, which I just don't see Michigan State or Michigan or Wisconsin ending up winning the Big Ten tournament. I'm torn right now between picking Maryland or Purdue. Maryland's
another sleeper.
Maryland is. See, it's tough because I definitely see Maryland being a first-round exit in the NCAA tournament in March Madness. But I also could see them as a team that goes on a run and kind of plays their best basketball in the Big Ten tournament rather than March Madness. I mean, I just really like – I understand it's tough losing at home, especially in the fashion that they did. But I think watching them play such a close game with Michigan State really – made me believe in this Maryland team a lot more, because we've talked about how Maryland's resume up to this point hasn't been the greatest in terms of the opponents they've played in their Big Ten scheduling. But I think watching them play as close of a game as they have with Michigan State, and I forget who it was the other day that they played, I think that gives me a lot more confidence as to Maryland's chances going into March. And I also kind of, I'm torn with Purdue, throwing Purdue as my pick in there, because I just think the experience is going to show. I think realistically, there's definitely a little bit of a sour taste, I think, left in the mouths of guys like Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer, I'm sure Matt Painter as well, too, with being as good as they were last year, not bringing back a Big Ten tournament championship. I think Braden Smith has the chance and the opportunity here to remind the whole country that he is the surefire Bob Cousy Award winner this year. Fletcher Loyer, a guy who's kind of been up and down this year. A lot of people thought he was going to have a little bit more of a bigger jump. I think he has an opportunity for them to remind him that he's been a starter on 2 back-to-back first 1-seed teams. And he's one of the more experienced 2 guards in the country and has all the experience in the world, has made big shots in the past, and is still able to do that. Guys like Trey Kaufman-Renn, who've made the jump, continue to remind people that they have improved so much. I think I lean more towards Purdue just because of the experience, and I trust Matt Painter more than I do Kevin Willard. So I think Purdue is my Big Ten tournament.
Not against that one at all. I mean, Purdue always seems to do well in the Big Ten tournament. They have a lot of recent wins. I mean, 2023 was the most recent, but they've done it a ton of times over, and it wouldn't be surprising to me. Maryland's a good second option. I kind of glossed over them. I haven't really looked into them as much as I think I should, but
I think a lot of it for Maryland's going to fall on how well Jacoby Gillespie, my mistake, plays in the tournament, because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he played the best game against Michigan State, or it might have been Julian Reese, one of those 2 guys who didn't play as well. But those 2 guys need to show up. I'm blanking on the freshman's name. Derek Queen. Yeah, Derek Queen has looked like
that guy. I mean, he's been that guy. I'm glad that he's worked out so well for them, but I don't know if he's going to be enough, especially if Gillespie or Reese doesn't perform the way that he should. It depends. It really depends, which is why I'm putting Ohio State in this scenario right now. But until the tournament actually starts and we see something like that, I'm going to leave it as there. So that'll cover SEC, Big Ten, Big East. Let's
Right.
swing by the ACC. Why not? Why not?
ACC,
Yeah,
sure.
we'll keep on the East Coast. Um, I want to go with Duke. I'm gonna go with Duke. I don't see anybody else. Maybe Clemson. Maybe Louisville.
Yeah,
I think it's over for anybody else who's looking at a Wake Forest or an SMU or a Pitt or maybe even a UNC. I just like there's no NC State this year. I don't really
right.
want to dispel any type of activity. There's no NC State this year. I don't see a DJ Burns anywhere. Um, and that just goes through the whole country as well. The ACC obviously was surprising for that reason last year, but this year's just not the same. It's really, really, really easy to tell. So Duke. I mean, what else am I supposed to say with that one?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard to argue with Duke. I mean, they by far look like the best team in the ACC this year. There's no competition for that place on the mantle, and of course, they're ranked number 2 in the country in the poll. Give me Louisville. Give me the cards. Give me the cards. I, I'm, I don't like this. I don't feel super confident about this pick, but give me Pat Kelsey, man. Um, again, I think I was telling Josh about how I think there is a real world where UNC is able to beat Duke in the second match of that rivalry, coming up really soon, actually. Just because you have to consider Duke really has nothing to lose right now. They pretty much locked up a number 1 seed. They could lose to UNC. They could lose in the first round of the ACC tournament. They probably still get a 1 seed, which is why I think there's a lot of freshmen on that roster who are so important to the team. There's a lot of guys who really haven't won much before on this team as well, too. I think there's a world where they see that they have a 1 seed and they just kind of don't necessarily play up to they don't necessarily get up as much for these games as they would had they need to win these games or they were in the running for a 1 seed. But again, they've kind of locked up the 1 seed at this point. I could just see again, it'd probably have to come in the later stages of the ACC tournament, but I think there's a world where Duke could, lose one to someone of the likes of like a Louisville or Clemson, maybe even an SMU. Probably not SMU, but I'm just throwing a name out there. But again, it's a lot of freshmen on this team. John Shire again, not great in the big games. Pat Kelsey, I mean, I just love what he's done with Louisville this year. He is a guy that should be a finalist for the Coach of the Year, even though I think Pitino is kind of running away with that. But I mean, you look at a guy like Chucky Hepburn too, who's been one of the best players in the country last few weeks, and that's a guy who can take over the tournament, take over in March as well. I'm going with the cards.
It's a fair choice. I mean, if I had a second option, I'd choose Clemson just because they've beaten Duke before. They're the only team that has beaten
Right.
Duke. Louisville's not bad, but if they play Duke, it's not going to go in their way. I just think.
I mean, obviously, I know they lost the game to Duke earlier in the year, but I don't think Louisville is by any means close to the product they are currently and what they could end up being, even as the next few weeks transpire. So I'd be very, very interested to see another matchup between Duke and Louisville if we at any point get the chance to see that.
I think that's definitely a fine choice as well. I mean, I just don't see it, but
Yeah, I mean that's
I like a
fair.
fun guess. I mean, I put out Ohio State. You're putting out Louisville. I think they have great opportunities to do both. And it's conference tournament time. Typically, the top seed doesn't win, but it's hard to not choose a team when they're like Duke or like Auburn.
Right.
That said, when we go over to the Big 12 for our last Power Five, I'm gonna go with Houston once again. I think they want their revenge. I know Ohio State took it from them last year, quite surprisingly, in my opinion. I think Houston has finally come back to form. They're going to get another 1 seed, third time in a row. Calvin Sampson is doing everything he needs to do. Can I say anything else? I mean, I guess an Iowa State could rise again, but they've been so bad recently that it's hard to really trust them. Arizona, I don't trust anymore. BYU is good, but not good enough. Maybe there's a bid stealer in Kansas State, but other than that, the conference is pretty much for the taking in the tournament for Houston, and they don't typically let up. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. It's like you look for a team that could end up maybe beating Houston, but I think you have to go with Houston here. Like you mentioned, Iowa State stole from them last year. I think Kelvin Sampson and their returners are coming back really motivated to get it done this year. And yeah, we talked about how Kelvin Sampson doesn't have a great track record in the actual tournament, but I mean, when it comes to the Big 12, they do well. 17-1 right now in conference, and yeah, I mean, it's tough to pick against them.
I know that might be I don't know if that's the best record he's ever had. I know he went undefeated
Right.
in the American his last year, but I mean,
I
we
mean,
don't.
realistically, I don't. I think the Big 12 is kind of ending up a lot weaker than I think it has looked at other points of the season. The other day I even watched Texas Tech playing at Fog Allen against Kansas, and Texas Tech really doesn't have all too much that's really kind of stands out. I mean, they've played really well in conference. They're obviously ranked super high in the poll, but I don't know. I think a lot of times they look stagnant on offense, even against a Kansas team whose defense is a little up and down. I know they have their adjusted defensive rating on KenPom is fairly high, but still, I mean, that's a Kansas team that plays with no effort half the time. It's still to be in a game where you get up double digits. I want to say multiple times and allow. I understand Kansas at Fog Allen, tough place to play, probably the toughest home environment, but it's still, I mean, they almost let that get away from them a few times. Obviously, they came out with the win. Which, by the way, come back to one of my bold takes. I said Kansas loses 2 or 3 more at Fog Allen after their first loss, so feeling pretty good about that one. But yeah, Texas Tech. I don't see them. I don't see anyone competing with Houston for the Big East, or not Big East, Big 12 tournament
Yeah, no,
championship.
it's up to trend. Honestly, on Texas Tech too, I think they're very overrated. That's why I really wasn't considering them. They feel like
Right.
possible first round upset. And I see the point with the Big 12. Big 12 has not been the conference I thought they were going to be.
Exactly.
It's been a worse product from last year, which is unfortunate because the Big 12, the past 5 to 10 years, the best team or the best conference, and they've had
Right.
the best teams. Look at Kansas, but also Baylor, Houston. I guess now Arizona's in there as well. So you'd expect more from the conference, but everything feels weaker. They're not on the level of the Big Ten or the SEC right now.
Now,
Uh,
let me ask, because I don't think so. But is there a world where Kansas State ends up a bid stealer?
I think I mentioned that earlier.
Did you
Really, really depends. They have to get the right. They have to get the right stuff.
draw?
They have to get the right
Yeah.
stuff.
Man, if you would have told me that Baylor and TCU would both be 9-9 at this point in the Big 12, that they'd have the same conference record at this point in the season, I would have at the beginning of the season. If you tell me that, I would have thought you were crazy. But
I know. I mean,
here we are.
both high on Baylor too, which sucks.
Yeah,
Listen,
yeah. I had them going to the Final Four in our preseason overview.
I know it. I mean, it's really an argument we can get into. I think after everything's done, but and you can leave it in your
Right,
comments
right.
too, because we definitely want to talk about conferences later on. But the Big 12 is a little bit more concerning than it should be. We shouldn't be seeing
Definitely.
Baylor underperform Iowa State underperform Arizona, BYU. I mean, Arizona has done pretty well actually, so I don't really know if I can put them on that scale. They just had a bad non-conference slate, but the conference as a whole has felt underwhelming. The talent that there's good talent there, but it's just not working in the way that it should. Like we were expecting
Right.
a well-ranked, maybe one-seeded Kansas at this point. We're not even going to see
Yeah,
5-seed Kansas, which is
I
incredible.
know.
That's a
It's
huge storyline that I have to think about almost every other day because what world are we living in where Kansas is not a good team? I,
I
I don't
know.
even know how to think about it.
Crazy.
I know, but now we're gonna like circle around and try like talk about the little mid-major conferences because there's a couple bid stealers I think that can exist there. I actually kind of want to highlight the American. I know Memphis has just pretty much run the house for a while, and they're in regardless of what happens. But
Yep.
I actually don't see them winning the American. They've stumbled. They've had like awkward losses. I know to Temple and to Wichita State. They kept firm over the weekend, beat UAB, which I think is a good sign. But I'm gonna go with UNT. They've been really solid. They have a nice non-conference slate as well. That's shown. They're the second best team in the American, under the radar. Great KenPom rating, great net rating. They're definitely the solid mid-major team. They have recently good history. They won the NIT 2 years ago, so maybe there's still some talent around. I see them being a bid sealer. They're the most likely bid sealer I see right now, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that take at all. That was North Texas you were talking
Yeah,
about,
North
correct?
Texas. All right, UNC is University
Yeah.
of North Texas. Is my bad.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure if you said T or
And
not at the end. I was a
UNC could
little
also be as well. They did it last year, but I don't know if it happens again.
yeah. Right. But yeah. I mean, I don't hate the North Texas pick. I feel like I it's very much a situation where Memphis and Penny Hardaway lose. I feel like the Penny Hardaway collapse isn't gonna come just yet. I think it's tough because it really is definitely a this definitely is a spot where Memphis could lose, even in like the second round of the tournament too. But I think it's going to hold off for a little bit. The Penny Hardaway collapse. I think they're going to win the American tournament. I think that the meltdown will come in the big dance, um, against
Uh,
whoever it is they play.
yeah,
But I think I'm going to hold off on predicting the Penny Hardaway collapse. I think they win the American Athletic Conference Championship. So I'm going to stick with Penny on this one. Hopefully, it proves me right.
what do you think about the A10?
The A10, I understand a lot of people haven't been high on them lately, but I could definitely see Dayton ending up winning it. I know VCU's been so good, but I do like Dayton's squad this year. I know they haven't been great, but they have fairly decent wins and out of conference. I mean, the UConn win is probably their biggest. But I mean, I don't know. It's tough going against VCU. George Mason, I think definitely. I mean, if I were to pick someone other than VCU, it'd probably be better for me to pick George Mason. But I kind of want to go with Dayton. Um, I mean, I don't really.
It's not a bad.
I just think Dayton. Yeah, I think Dayton, man. I mean,
I mean, I'm personally going to go with VCU. I just don't see them really losing that much. But also, I remember last year we saw some. I thought Dayton was winning that one fair and square, and then Duquesne came out of nowhere. So I think that was
right.
fair. And I mean, this is hands down the best A10 I've seen since COVID year, where Dayton was a possible one seed. Like we're looking at obviously Dayton, George Mason, SLU, um, possibly some other teams lower on that, like maybe even Duquesne again, depending on how things go. I mean, Duquesne was so low, no even about them. But the team that I'm thinking is St. Joe's. They beat Texas Tech in non-conference. I don't forget about that game at all. They were supposed to be the best team in the A10, and they've shown it. I think the talent is definitely there. They just haven't had the quality or the opportunity for quality wins, unfortunately. And I think that looking at it right now, they kind of sit at that like perfect spot where they rise above other teams getting eliminated early or even middle way through. They have beaten some of the higher level talent teams as well. They haven't beaten VCU, so that's kind of why I'm like leaning more towards them. But overall, I mean, it's really I think that's really how it would probably end up being. I think VCU wins it, and if it's not VCU, it's St. Joe's as a bid stealer as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that take at all. St. Joe's is one of the better teams in this conference. They had some big wins in out of conference play. It was Villanova. I think they beat correct earlier this year.
I know they beat Texas Tech. That's why I still see them as
Right.
possibly being in a good spot for that reason.
Uh huh. Yeah. I mean, I think. I mean, I just Dayton. I kind of like just what they have with the Nate Santos and forget their that one other guy's name. I think Cheeks.
Yeah,
But
not sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
but VCU probably. I almost want to even throw St. Louis into the
Yeah,
discussion here.
SLU
Not.
can fit that role too.
I mean, I think they could. Do I think it happens? More than likely, definitely no. But just I could. There's a world where SLU, my mistake, ends up being a bid stealer, the Billikens, and I mean Gibson's been pretty good for them this year. Of course, they have Robbie Avila, but I mean he's kind of up and down with injuries. I don't even know is he even healthy right now? I haven't really kept up
I
with
don't know either, but I
St.
think
Louis.
he's been playing a lot more recently than he has at the start of the season, which I think is stuff he's shown. I mean, they've been a better team, but when you do look at it, they're sitting in the middle of the pack. And once again, the pack is big enough, so maybe they can break through.
Right.
Seeing St. Joe's, but St. Joe's is really just an X. That could be SLU, that can be Loyola Chicago, that can be the Dayton. There really are a ton of teams that fit that role right now. And I think that unless VCU gets eliminated early, it'll probably be them. But if it's not, it could be literally anybody in that conference.
Right. Yeah. I mean, uh, I think I'm gonna stick with my Dayton pick, but yeah, it's tough to go against VCU or even George Mason.
Definitely, definitely. Beyond that, let's go a little bit west
Do you want to
to the Missouri Valley.
Missouri
Um,
Valley?
I know right now I would probably put um, Drake just in there because it's Drake. Bid stealer wise, Bradley and you and I are there, but Drake is just the best team. I mean, it's definitely an opportunity place. A fall that was kind of the scenario with Indiana State last year, where they could have done that if they had won and just missed the tournament. But this Drake team is better than Indiana State last year, so it's hard to really say.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I kind of want to go with you and I really do. I tuned
As a
into their
bid
game
stealer,
against
ooh,
Drake. Yeah, as a bid stealer, I tuned into their game against Drake about a week ago at this point, and let me say that gym gets loud. I know Josh was telling me that you and I tends to be pretty solid basketball atmosphere, but I was pretty taken away with that. And I mean, in that game, they kept pace with Drake a lot. I mean, they got a really good player and Titan Anderson, and I think he played really well in that game. Um, I, Again, it's tough to go against Drake. They've by far looked the best in the conference, but I like kind of you and I as a bid stealer here. I mean, again, just watching them keep it as close as they did in that game against Drake was pretty. I think definitely boosted my. I mean, that wasn't a team that was on my radar really before that game, so I have kind of kept up with them a little bit since, and I like you and I a lot. I think you and I has a legit chance to go and win this thing.
yeah, that's honestly a cool take. That would be really fun to see you and I back. And then we'll finish. We'll keep going west even more. We'll finish off in the Mountain West. Um, there are currently three teams in right now, that being New Mexico, Utah State, and San Diego State, and Boise State, which I'm wearing little Boise States here today to represent.
Oh, nice.
I know
There
I
you go.
have that for fun. They're right in the bubble. They might be in, depending on who you're talking to, which we'll talk a little bit later on today. But I think probably New Mexico wins this one. They won it last year. It's a better team now. I think New Mexico is really going to peel for that 8 or 9 seed. They're going to look for a deep run that they missed out on last year. There could be a Colorado State in there for bid stealing. There could be Boise State in there as well, depending on how things work out. But in my opinion, give me the Lobos. Maybe San Diego State too, because it's San Diego State. It's really weird to see them not
Right.
be in the final game for that conference. What do you have?
I'm going New Mexico. I know a little bit off recording where we had a brief conversation about New Mexico, but I feel like it could be their year. Just all around, just they've tore through the Mountain West this season. I think they're going to go on a run and win the Mountain West champion tournament championship, and I think they're going to go on a deep run in March. The more and more I think about it, they have a top 30 defense on Ken Palm. I understand their offense isn't the greatest, but just Donovan Dent. I mean, that's a guy who can go out and win you a game on his own. I mean, Richard Pitino's coached his butt off this year too. I mean, I'm going to go with New Mexico. I don't see anyone who's going to dethrone them in the race for the tournament championship.
Definitely. Do you have any other mid-major conferences or anything else we missed that you think?
I mean, I definitely think Central Connecticut's a team to watch out for, but I think they should more than likely walk away with the Northeast tournament championship. Probably no problem. Yeah, I mean, I think we pretty much hit on most of the big ones. I mean, Chattanooga, a team to watch
Yeah, I kind of do want to
out
take
of the Southern.
a little talk with the Big West. I know we've heard a lot about UC San Diego. Personally, they feel like the best team, and there are talks about obviously UC Irvine, which has played very well and has split the series with UC San Diego, possibly winning over them. If that scenario happens, do you think it's going to be enough to get a two bid Big West? Do you think UC San Diego's earned an at large?
I I think so. I mean, I think UC San Diego and UC Irvine have both done enough to get into the tournament this year. I mean, and just I mean, you have to count their games against each other too towards their resumes. I mean, those games are just been great. Um, but I think they've done enough.
I mean, I would love to see it, man. I mean, that was what I was expecting to see with the Missouri Valley last
I mean,
year, but
I think this could be a year where we see multiple mid-major conferences be a two-bid league,
I know. Would it be
even at large as well.
because
What was that?
I definitely agree with you. So I know
Oh
we
yeah,
probably won't get last year with the five bid Steelers, which is incredibly rare.
right. Yeah, I was insane.
I think UC San Diego could end up being an at large. I know Memphis is already an at large. VCU is already an at large. Drake is most likely an
Right,
at large. So that's an opportunity for four bid Steelers from the minor or the mid major conferences. And the major conferences, you really only need one, and then you're already at five again. So I think there
right.
is that place, but I don't think it's going to happen. But it
Anyone
would
in the WCC, you could end up seeing a bid stealer.
definitely. It would be cool. I think it'd be really cool. I don't know if the WCC would produce anything. It's always St. Mary's and Gonzaga, but like maybe with Washington State and Oregon State in there, perhaps something changes. But
Mhm.
it's probably going to be St. Mary's
I think San Fran has a chance to get sneaky and end up
and Fred.
stealing a bid,
But I think they were back
but
last year with Mogbo. But
yeah,
I don't know. But we're going to over a little bit. I know we kind of tidbitted at it a little bit, but
right.
obviously we already made our Final Four and everything like that. But one thing that we kind of noticed was that we weren't really talking about the lower level teams that always seem to make it to the Final Four. Think FAU 2 years ago,
Right.
last year. Think uh, you know
NC State.
State. Think even Auburn from 2019 was a five seed. There's always this level of obscurity where there'll be a team, possibly even a double digit seeded team that makes the Final Four. And we got to look out for that. We got to be the ones to call it if we can at least, because it
Right.
won't be all one seeds. Unless it's 2022, it's most likely going to be a ton of random seeds. There'll probably be an Auburn or a Duke or both, but there's enough there's enough weakness from the one seeds and two seeds to allow for these other level teams to walk in. So who do you have as like a possible Final Four sleeper team in your mind?
Now, I know one we mentioned was New Mexico. Final Four, I don't know about Final Four. Second weekend, Elite Eight, I definitely think they do have that type of upside. Again, I kind of worry about teams that are so defense oriented. This is a team that has a top 30 defense and their offense is outside the top 80s on Ken Palm. But again, when you have a player like a Donovan Dent who can go out and be electric and score 30 on any given night, that makes it a lot more calming, I think, about your chances going into March. When all else fails on offense and you're not getting anything out of your actions, you have a player you can just give the ball and he can go get you a bucket. And that's what you're going to need in the tournament. You're going to need tough shot making. That's a guy who can do that for you. He does a lot as a facilitator as well. It's definitely going to be a guy who seriously test the NBA waters this off season. But yeah, I mean, I think New Mexico is a team you have to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say they're personally my most likely team from like an eight seed or above line to make it. I mean, it's really hard to tell. This is always one of the hardest things because you never expected NC State, you never expected FAU, you didn't expect Chicago in 2018, and I don't think you're going to expect Ole Miss. I think they've really come under the
Yeah,
radar recently. They have probably one of the best wins a team like this can have, winning at Alabama. You just once again you don't see games like that very often. They've snuck around and once again a huge bid SEC. They're probably going to take like a 5 or 6 seed, so they're definitely like not the highest level, but they're on that route. If they get the path that I think they can get, they really don't seem to be vulnerable to any first round upsets. They can upset a 3 seed if they really feel like it. I think they can go toe to toe with the 1 seed if things really matter because they do it almost all the time in the SEC. And I think that if things really work out in their favor, that's a Final Four team that no one's going to see coming, or maybe a couple people. I think if no one's going to see a team coming, it's going to be an 11 seed that maybe is sitting on the bubble right now, like in Arkansas or maybe even like a VCU. It's really, really, really hard to tell right now. But if I'm going to go with my gut, other than New Mexico, which I think is the best option, I would put Ole Miss down there.
right. Yeah, no, I like the Ole Miss pick. I think they got a lot of players that are underrated. Matthew Morrell has been pretty solid this year. Not as good as last year, but decent showing this year.
I think it's
Dre
Sean
Davis,
Padula for me. I think it was any.
Sean Padula. Yeah, I saw that he had a big shot the other night.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of why I'm thinking about him too because once again we're not going to have a DJ Burns, but maybe we have an Elijah Martin. Maybe there's an Lamont Butler in there, and I think that's where Sean Padula comes in. He can turn into be that famous, stereotypical March Madness story of some all right to really good player from a team that's not exactly the best, making it this far. I mean, that could be Donovan Dent as well, but I think Sean Padula kind of fits that role almost perfectly. Maybe I'm manifesting this into reality, but I really do have higher hopes on Old Miss, and I think most of the people have. I think at a minimum they're Sweet 16 right now, but Elite Eight Final Four is within reach without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean that's a team that was in the poll in the early stretches this year too. I mean, yeah, they've struggled at times. Again, it's the SEC. Every team's going to struggle, unless you're Auburn. But yeah, that's definitely a team that could end up having Final Four upside. I guess to throw another team out there who we did mention earlier, and I actually do think can make a Final Four again, kind of depending on draw, and their shot makers need to show up and hit shots. But it's Xavier. It's a team that can make a lot of noise in the Big East tournament, and I just think they have the team to be able to go on a run in March. You have to remember they've had one of the worst. Their programs had some of the worst injury luck over the last 2 or 3 seasons out of anyone in the country. 2 years ago, they were second in the Big East. I want to say, I think in the regular season, they lost in the Big East championship to Marquette. They had a tough, not a great showing in that March, but I mean, last year, you think they're going to come back? They bring back Zach Freemantle, Davey McKnight, and then those guys both get hurt and miss the majority of last season, if not the entire season. This year, they brought those guys back. Zach Fremantle's been a little up and down, but when he's on, he's on. Davey McKnight's been good too. Ryan Conwell, the transfer from Indiana State, that Indiana State team with Robbie Avila, Kevin Schertz as the coach. I mean, he's looked like one of the best guards in the Big East this year. One of the more underrated transfers, I think, around the country. Him, Dante Maddox, Davey McKnight, Marcus Foster, some of the shot making they bring in some of the games I've watched them play this year, it's ridiculous. Some of the step back threes and just the tough shots they're able to shoot, and they're all big. They're able to get into the lane. They can force the issue of going to the basket and really impose their will on a lot of the smaller guards, which they could end up facing in the tournament. And I think that's a team that could pose a lot of matchup nightmares for some of the higher seeds in the tournament, just with the size of their backcourt. I also think Dalen Swain, if he plays well, like he has in a few games this year, that brings a completely new dimension to that roster. especially like just to have a guy on the wing who's able to score and go and get you a bucket at times when you need it. And I think Sean Miller's a good coach too. I know he's been the subject of a little bit of controversy at times, but I think this Xavier squad has all the talent in the world to be able to go on a deep run in March. Final Four, of course, probably not. Second weekend, still, you're not sure. But if they hit on all cylinders, then I don't see why they can't go at least to the second weekend.
I mean, that's really convincing reasoning. I honestly didn't think about it. I mean, once again, no one's going to see it until it happens, which I think
Right.
one of the funnest parts about March Madness. I mean, right now, if you told me that there's going to be an 11 seed in there, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'd probably be at least a little bit depending on who the team is, but there's always that team that does it. Overall, though, I mean, once again, just as I said before, I don't expect it. I don't really see a team under a 3 seed, or like over a 3 seed, I should say, making it right now. This year feels so chalky that it's going to be really rough. But I thought the same thing about last year. So I don't really know. It really, really
Right.
depends. And if it's going to be a team, yeah, it's probably the ones we've mentioned right now. And if it's not, I'm going to be a little surprised too. To be real with you, I hope we caught it. I'll say that as well.
Yeah. Hey, that'll definitely help the viewership if we're able to catch.
Listen, guys, we're trying to get one crazy call. There has to be one good
Right.
upset, one Final Four. There has to be something that we got. We're too good to not get this right. That's the way I feel.
Yeah.
But
Definitely. Yeah.
I think
Fingers crossed. One of those.
definitely. And speaking of Xavier in the bubble, we kind of want to have our last discussion of bubble talk. I know we kind of haven't spoken about the bubble in a while now, but the bubble is in its last form. There's really only 10 to 15 teams that really exist on this bubble. Really, it's the last week for most of these teams, plus conference tournaments that can decide everything. So we want to showcase 6 teams, 3 bubble in and 3 bubble out, and see what they can do to stay in the fight. So do you want to do bubble? You want to start bubble in or bubble out?
Let's start with bubble in.
Yeah. So the first team in our bubble in is Georgia. They have the great win over Florida, which I think is what's keeping them in. Most major sites, ESPN, CBS Sports, they both have Georgia either right there or like right outside of it. What do you think they need to do to stay in?
I mean, I think they need to finish off their SEC play strong. Can check their remaining schedule really fast, unless you know it off the top of your head.
I think they actually don't
play coming up. Is their season? All right. So they play South Carolina on the road. Need to win that, and they get Vanderbilt at home. So they definitely need to beating Vanderbilt would be huge for them. I think a win against them would be really, really helpful. Probably just try to do a little damage in the SEC tournament if possible. I'd say maybe try to get into that second round. I think that those two things, beating Vandy, winning out, beating South Carolina on the road, and hopefully beating Vandy at home if you're a Georgia fan, and then winning 1 game, maybe 2 in the SEC tournament, that should be more than enough, I think, to get them there.
Exactly. I mean, I think depending on how things work, they could lose to Vandy and win a game, and that should be enough. They have to win the South Carolina game, though. That's more than enough, because that's probably a quad 2 game right there.
Right.
It doesn't matter as much. Overall, though, I think they're more in than out. It's obviously an easy world because the SEC is so bubbly right now, but I would put them in. And another SEC team that's in right now by the skin of their teeth is Arkansas. Obviously, they've done well recently. Think of their win against Missouri. That's the big thing that's keeping them in. But they did have that blowback loss at South Carolina, which rings huge alarm bells. This team should not be losing games like that. What do you think they need to do to stay in?
I mean, they need to have a really good show in the SEC tournament, I think. I think the tournament committee by now has realized who Cal is as a coach. And it adds the excitement, but at the same time, you're really going to continue to put in a guy who is on the bubble this year, but for the last several years that Kentucky has lost some really, really bad first round, second round games. And just to put a guy coached with that track record as of late who's on the bubble this year, not hasn't had as good of a showing I think a lot of people thought he was going to have this year. Of course, Missouri one helps, is like you mentioned, kind of keeping the resume afloat right now. But are they going to continue to kind of let Cal slide here? And I don't know. I think they probably do end up getting in just because Cal is the coach. Probably helps with getting the benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, they definitely need to do a lot in the SEC tournament. I think. I mean, I'm not sure how far they can go, but they need to have a strong showing against whoever it is they end up drawing.
Definitely. I mean, for me, the rest of the schedule isn't even that good. They have a home game against Mississippi State, so that should definitely help. And then they go on the road to play Vanderbilt.
Right.
So if they can split the series with those two games and win one, maybe two games, and then pray that there's no bid stealers like the ones we've spoken about.
Right.
They should be in. Otherwise, it's going to be a really, really rough conversation for many Hawk fans when it comes to how we're going to treat Coach Cal, because regardless of how this ends up going, this is most likely going to be a very disappointing season for Cal. And it's kind of rough. It's kind of rough to say, but I think he's definitely watered down a lot of his opportunities, and it's not looking good. But they're right now on the border for it, so keep going and they can make it in. And then the third team, which we did speak about earlier, is Xavier, that we're penciling in his bubble in. They had that win against Creighton, which keeps them in. That's their, I think, second quad one win. They haven't done horribly. It's just the Big East being a weaker division.
Right.
So, do you think? What do you think they need to do?
I mean, I think they're bubbling. I think they're in right now as it stands. Definitely just need to finish off their schedule. Just good. Try to come out with a win. I forget who they play in the season. I might check that really fast.
Schedule wise, they play. They go.
All right, so they play Butler. They play Butler at Hinkle, and then they get Providence at home. So that's definitely a scenario where you probably should win both games if you're Xavier. But I just think they're probably in right now as it stands, unless again they're a victim of a lot of bid. Just if there's an insane amount of bid steals once again this year, they could end up falling victim to that. But yeah, I think you just need to win out. Just don't lose to Butler and Providence, who haven't been good at all this year in a very weak Big East. And you need to make some damage in the Big East tournament, which I just talked about a lot, how I think they're more than capable of doing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, the way
I think winning one game in the Big East tournament would probably be enough for them.
If they close at these next two games, win one game, they're done. I think.
Yeah.
And then if there are bid sealers, win two, and they're good.
Right.
But beyond that, we gotta look at our bubble out teams. There's a couple that I think are just outside of it that we would love to cover. Big talk, Texas. Haven't done well.
Yeah.
They did start the season off pretty right with the non-conference schedule, but the SEC play has really ruined them. They have a good win against Kentucky recently, but do you think it's enough? What should they pull for if they want to make it in at this point?
I don't think they have enough. I think they're going to need to really go deep into the SEC tournament to be able to get in. It's unfortunate because you hate to see the opportunity of a guy like a Trey Johnson go into the dance, just like slip away. Just what what he could possibly end up doing in March Madness if Texas were to get in, just with how good of a player he is and how he's not talked about enough as one of the better freshmen in the country. With just how good of a pure scorer he is, but yeah, I don't think Texas is in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what they can do as well. I mean, their schedule isn't once again that bad. They go to Mississippi State and against Oklahoma, so
that's two good opportunities right there.
Wins. But like you said before, they have to go far. I think if they don't win both of these games, it's go.
They might have to win it.
They might have to win it all. They might have to win it all, or at least make it to the championship game.
Right.
And I don't know if they can do that. They have exactly 5 wins and 11 losses in SEC play, which in basically any other scenario is enough for you to be eliminated by a month. But in SEC, you could have 4 wins, and you'd probably still be in that scenario. I mean, look at Oklahoma for reference. So I would definitely say, if you're a Texas fan, keep your head still. There's still an opportunity, but it's getting dark. It is getting very dark. And there just needs to be that level of intensity that goes into this that can keep you going. And they have to almost win out in that way, if not win out entirely. Another
Right.
team that I think kind of needs that scenario to happen is Boise State. They've really walked their way in. They have had a great schedule in the later half of Mountain West play. We know they're always a bubble team. Tyson Dagenhart can really finish his most likely final year at Boise State, and in college in general, getting that surmounting NCAA tournament appearance. Maybe this is the year they win a game. Probably not, in my opinion. No offense, but do you think they need to win the Mountain West? Do you think they can really pull it out either way?
I mean, in terms of Boise State needing to win the Mountain West, they more than likely do. Just, I mean, you look at where they stand in that conference. They're the fifth. They're in fifth place, and you already have probably two, three, maybe even four teams getting a bid in already from that conference. I just don't know. They played fairly decent in Mountain West play. I do think they probably need to make it to the Mountain West Championship to be able to get in. But if they don't, then it's going to be really, really tough for them to get in, I think.
Definitely. I mean, maybe it's the bias once again of having the shirt, but I think the Broncos are in a better spot than most people think. They have the quality wins of the Utah State and the New Mexico from
Right.
very recent. They have a pretty easy finish. They play Colorado State at home and go on the road to a very lowly Air Force. So if they win those two games, which most likely they do, they can stay in front of the bubble. Um, in terms of the Mountain West tournament itself, winning it obviously will give them everything they need, maybe even a 10 seed, maybe escape that first four. But right now, I think they need to at least win two games. They have to be able to get a win probably over Utah State or Colorado State for reference. If they play San Diego State, I don't think they win because it's San Diego State or New Mexico even. So the path has to be there as well. But I think the odds are slowly going to turn into their favor as time works. But once again, if they don't get that bid, if they don't have those, if those bid stealers are that big of a deal, like they were last year, they're not going in. But right now, if you tossed a coin, I'd probably put down Boise State for being in. But right now, they're just out, like just out.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're on the same wavelength here about Boise State, which Mountain West. So I think could end up being better than what we saw last year out of the Mountain West
I mean,
tournament.
it's hard to really say because the Mountain West had more teams last year. I mean, the only team we're really missing is Colorado State, and even then, there's still opportunity for them to bid steal. But I think overall, Boise State definitely represents that like last bastion of Mountain West bubble teams that we've always known to have, and they're like filling that role, I guess, in a way.
Yeah,
And then the team that we didn't expect to see in the bubble that is looking the least likely to make it that we're listing right now is UNC. Um,
right.
don't know what's going on. I don't know why they even signed Hubert Davis at 2030. That's like a death sentence. I feel for
Yeah,
fans.
that's
It's
that's a interesting.
I don't know. I mean, they could do it. They have the opportunity to win at home against Duke. I think that game alone, if they win, could be enough, as we've mentioned before. But they might need to really make that deep run in the ACC play. And if there's a bid stealer, even a few, they might have to win it all. That's how I put.
Yeah, I mean, they've sort of hit their stride somewhat as of late. They've played a lot better recently. Of course, if they beat Duke, they're in. Um, like complete. I mean, there's no question there. They beat Duke, they're in. If they lose to Duke, which more than likely will end up happening. They're gonna have to pick off. They're gonna have to go deep in the ACC. Realistically, they might have to do something similar to what we saw NC State do last year. Um, and do I see that happening? I really don't. I just don't. I don't think this UNC team has enough. Just you really got to bank on RJ Davis going nuclear, which he is capable of. Don't get me wrong, but it's been proven this year that him going out and being able to score 30 on any given night isn't enough for UNC to win. And RJ Davis honestly hasn't really done that the way I thought he was going to be able to this year. And it's just so evident how much they lack front court depth and just the presence there. Of course, losing Baycott sucks, and you expected bigger leaps from guys like Ellie Cadeau and Seth Trimble. You kind of just flashes here and there this season, but it's really not there. Kate Tyson was a miss in the portal, and yeah, I mean, Ian Jackson has been the one bright spot I think for this team this year. He's played really well. Drake Powell, I think, is kind of a project player, but you really got to bank on a combo of Ian Jackson and RJ. I think just going nuclear in the ACC tournament, and they got to make it at least to the semifinal, maybe the championship game to even have a chance of getting in. I think if they don't beat Duke,
No,
that is.
that's definitely true. I mean, right now they're out. For me, I think that there's still an opportunity, literally because of this Duke game. If they don't get it, like you said, it's really winning the ACC or bust. And if there's bid Steelers, and it has to be that way as well. Overall, I mean, I get where you're coming from. It just sucks, for all UNC fans out there. That the rivalry flipped in its head in an instant. UNC won it 2 times in a row last year. Looks like Duke's going to win it 2 times in a row to get right back at them. But the struggle just to make it like a first 4 for UNC is surprising, and it shouldn't be like this. Like, I still have no clue what's going on in Chapel Hill right now.
Right.
But if we
Which,
can make it,
by the way, I'm probably going to end up looking stupid saying this. I'm taking UNC against Duke and at the Dean Dome. I like UNC in that game. I really do. I think you consider RJ Davis, a guy who's been in the program for 5 years. It's going to be his last time playing Duke if they don't match up in the ACC tournament, which obviously isn't a guarantee to play them in that tournament. So it's his last regular season game against Duke. As a 5th-year player, one of the kind of on that same Caleb Love wavelength, we're kind of not as polarized, I'd say, but there's definitely people who dislike him and others who like him. I'm sure if you're a Carolina fan, you love him. But these guys closed in on a lot of UNC and ACC records. Obviously, was on a team that swept Duke last year. Kind of got they kind of got smoked. They got smoked by Duke earlier this year at Cameron Indoor, and I think he's not going to want to go out without swinging. I think we could end up seeing an RJ Davis legacy game potentially against Duke. But again, I don't even with that, I don't know if that's enough to beat Duke. If Duke actually shows up to play,
I mean, it would be cool once again, but this is not anywhere close. This is the best Duke we're going to see in a long time. Better than 2019, maybe even better than 2015. In the ACC as a whole. If Carolina can do it, I think you're right. They've won it, and they can walk in all comfortable. But
right?
I don't see it. I don't see it at all. And I mean, I felt bad once again. The rivalry is great when both teams are great, like last year for reference, but it's not working out right now for UNC at all. These past 3 years are way too up and down for anyone's likings. And if things keep this way, that contract that Hubert Davis signed is going to look even worse than it already does now.
Definitely.
But
yeah, I mean, I don't hate extending Hubert Davis. I just the length, and the money on it is what kind of concerns me.
Yeah. And with how much they're going to have to rebuild the team next year, it's a little bit of a concern. I mean, but that's more of an idea for another episode because I think we're pretty much good on what we have set. Later on this week, we're going to have a video of us doing a bracket reveal. Obviously, we're going to be going through and just seeing what we have. We're going to put all of our things in paper so we can finally get a real view. I mean, we've only talked so much about this team's going to the Final Four, this team can do it, this team can win. Now we're putting things on paper. So I think we're going to really put our words where our mouth is. And I think you guys are going to really like that as well. I hope you like this episode and get ready. We're gonna have a lot more going on. We planned on having a group, I guess, live recording of Selection Sunday. We're gonna react to that. I'm personally going to the Big East tournament for the championship game, so I'm gonna have a short or some video on that as well. So we're definitely gonna get involved. And if you guys want to get more involved with us, please do like, subscribe, comment. Now's the time to do it. It's the best time. It's the best month of the year for you guys. and let's just have fun. I think there's going to be some basketball along the way.
I mean, yeah, like Josh just mentioned, if you're going to get into it, whether it's a sport of college basketball or watching our videos, right now is the time to do it. Um, it's just gonna this March is gonna be absolutely electric. I mean, it could end up being one of the craziest tournaments, one of the best tournaments we've seen in a while, possibly since 2019. We'll see. I'm super stoked for it. These conference tournaments, I'm sure, are gonna be great. Super excited, especially about the Big East tournament. I already know my Huskies got to go on a run. Got to start beating Marquette Wednesday. But yeah, I think that pretty much takes care of everything. Again, like Josh mentioned, please, if you like the content, tell other people about it. It really helps the YouTube's algorithm. Just engage with it in any way you can. And that takes care of everything. So until our next episode with our bracket, we will see you all next time.
Thank you, everybody.